Imagine owning a practice, and every doc in the practice was not only a partner, but a voting partner whose voting power was equal to yours. Why on earth would you do that? Well, there's reasons for it, and my guest today is in such a setup, and he's going to explain why. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. And the mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they want, but let's face it, care is better when the doctor owns the place and has the most freedom to make the clinical decisions that they think are best for you, and you the same, as opposed to somebody else owning it, and eventually their agenda starts getting whispered in the doctor's ear. Rarely is that putting you first. I'd rather kind of minimize that if we can. And today, my guest is Dr. Bradley Block. Brad is a private practice otolaryngologist on Long Island, New York, where he lives with his wife and 3 young sons. He is a partner at ENT and Allergy Associates and creator of the Physician's Guide to Doctoring podcast. He's available as a keynote speaker on improving the patient experience, doctor-patient communication, and running office hours efficiently. Brad, or Dr. Block as his parents like to call him, went to med school at SUNY Buffalo and graduated with research honors. He then went on to his ENT residency at Georgetown. He enjoys spending time with his family, surfing. Yeah, he's here to clarify there is surfing on Long Island. Skiing, he's here to clarify, no, there is no skiing on Long Island. Smoking meat, which is hugely interesting to me. Exercising and finding any excuse to quote an 80s movie. For example, I'm not saying I'd build a summer home here, but the trees are actually quite lovely. Brad, thank you for taking some time to come on PracticeCare.
And if anyone gets the movie quote without having to look it up, I'm at Physician's Guide on Twitter and Instagram. Definitely let me know. It bothers my wife to no end anytime we get somewhere. And she's like, it's kind of nice here. And I say, yeah, well, I wouldn't build a summer home here, but the trees are actually quite lovely.
And she still does. Yeah. And I'll raise my hand. I failed. I stared at that quote saying, freaking know where that's from. And I cannot put my finger on it. Anyway, it's good to have you on. So let's get into this. Yeah. And let's start where I start with a lot of guests. Just kind of fill out your bio. How long have you been at where you are now? How'd you get there? And just kind of help us get to know you a bit better.
So one, I definitely just want to take the opportunity to plug my podcast. Again, I know you mentioned it, Physician's Guide to Doctoring. It's for physicians in any stage of training. And it's like the Swiss Army knife of podcasts for physicians. So really, if there's anything you're interested in that's physicianing, definitely check it out.
But and we've got the link in the show notes. We will. So you're covered. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay. So I joined my practice right out of residency. So, I did my residency in otolaryngology, did my 5 years. I did not do a fellowship. So I'm a general otolaryngologist. And, I looked at a couple of practices throughout the country and ended up back on Long Island, which is where I'm from. And then when I was looking at practices, there were a bunch to choose from. I was never really interested in academia. I was never really interested in working for a hospital, although I did interview with a multi-specialty practice and then, a couple of smaller practices. And to me, it was just a no-brainer to join the practice that I was with, to join ENT and Allergy Associates. For any ENTs that are listening or anyone familiar with otolaryngology, we are the big New York group. Like everyone refers to us as, that big New York group. And so what we're going to be talking about today is the special sauce that allowed us to evolve into that big New York group. Now, when I had joined, it had already been in existence for like 15 years. So it was a pretty well-oiled machine. That being said, like we keep oiling it. So it, it keeps improving. We keep improving what we have. But it was just a no-brainer to join. Am I going to join like a multi-specialty group where, there are a couple otolaryngologists that are treated, okay, or a smaller practice where there are like 3 or 4 physicians and, there's one main physician and everyone kind of, maybe you're called partner, but you kind of work for them.
Right.
Or am I going to join the practice that we're going to be talking about today? And it was just, physician owned, physician run, and such a large entity that, it's hard to get pushed around, right?
Yeah.
And the physicians, because we own it, our well-being is the priority. Clearly patient care is the priority, but like, the people running the practice are the people seeing patients every day. And if their life stinks, they're going to do something about it.
And so, yeah, so, multiple owners, multiple partners, there's nothing new about this. What's different is that you've got, every partner's an equal partner. How did it get to be that way? Was it always with what I know you didn't found it, you're not one of the founding partners, but with what why that?
But I am drinking the Kool-Aid. I am drinking
Yeah.
the Kool-Aid. In fact, when we're interviewing people and they decide not to join us, when they decide to join academia, like I kind of get it, right? Like they're
Just
looking
something
for something
else.
different. But if
Yeah.
you're going to join another private practice instead of us, I just don't get it. So the question is, how did we get this way?
Yeah.
And the original founding partners, again, we're reaching back into the history when
Sure.
I was
Sure.
probably, I think I was like starting out in med school when this took place, or maybe
Yeah.
even in college. Um, but the founding partners, there were three different offices in New York. I think it was New York's in Manhattan and Westchester, and they
Mhm.
decided to become one larger practice, and they hired some non-physician leadership. Um, and in the process, at some point, I think they sold to private equity, and that turned out to be a
Mhm.
bad decision. So they bought it back.
Wow.
And in doing so, created the charter for the group. And one of the things they created in the charter of the group is that, like, if someone joined and became partner, they would become an equal share partner. And that's still the case, to the point now where we have around 250 physicians,
Mhm.
170 of whom are equal share partners, equal voting rights owners.
Okay.
Doesn't mean we all have the same income, right?
Right.
But
Okay.
if there's going to be a change to the practice, and we have an elected board of 7 physicians that run the practice, and we have a C-suite of non-physicians that really run the practice,
Yeah.
but they answer to the board, and the board is elected by the physician. So we are a physician-run
You really
practice.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that we're 170, what that tells you also is that we have a partnership track. And as long as you cross your T's and dot your I's, like, you will become a partner. And ENT is such a small field that if we weren't making people regularly that did what you're supposed to do, if we're not regularly making people partner, word gets out, and then we can't
Yeah.
recruit anymore.
Interesting.
So it really develops steam in that way. And so the original partners, I can't say specifically why they decided to make it this way,
Yeah.
but they had the foresight to make it so appealing to join us. And
Mhm.
then we have all these benefits of, economies of scale and leverage with insurance companies because we have so many physicians.
Mhm. Well, and the conclusion I'm drawing is pre-private equity sale, they weren't structured this way. And then something got in their head somehow, some way to say, we if we run it the way we ran it before the sale, we're going to end up back with another sale. So what do we need to change and why? Um, Something that was compelling enough for them to surrender some power, right? And surrender maybe some income, I guess, as well. It's a pretty powerful something happened. I mean,
Well,
you know,
income in the long run, not necessarily, right?
yeah.
Because, as we continue to grow, again, benefiting from economies of scale. So our
Hmm.
purchasing powers, we don't have to pay as much for equipment. We're maybe able to negotiate better rents because and we're also able to hire people that can help us
Hmm.
to run it efficiently. Like we can afford a, like a very high end CFO, COO, CEO in order to
Yeah.
run things efficiently because we have the income of 250 physicians to pay
Right.
their salaries.
So 170 partners, the other 80, they're on a partnership track. It's a matter of
Yeah, I mean,
time and
sometimes
checking
people,
boxes and
yeah, and ours happens to be sweat equity.
okay.
If you're coming in out of residency, if you're coming in with your own practice, it's really different for each practice. Like I can't speak to that. I came in
Hmm.
out of residency, and when you come in out of residency, everyone really gets pretty much the same deal.
Hmm.
But when you're coming in with your own practice and your own book of business, that then
Hmm.
changes. And so sometimes it's, you're coming in out of residency and you have a certain number of years that you need to be with us in order to make partner. And then we have some physicians that are like winding down.
Hmm.
Maybe they have their own practice and it's not so busy that they become a full partner, but they're just tired of dealing with the management and they want to join us, or they were part of academia and they just want to wind down. So they join us. So, it comes,
Okay.
people come in all sorts of shapes and sizes
Right.
that they
Right.
join us, and they like it because, again, we're run by physicians. And so like all the stuff that you might have an administrator having you do if you're working for a hospital system, like, oh, someone's making this decision, but they're not living this life. It's
Hmm.
easy for them to say, oh, just do a couple more of these modules, or just do some more weekend hours. Oh, it's easy. Like, I work weekends, you have to work weekends. Well, we don't mandate that people work weekends. They wouldn't want to join us anymore. It's an option if you want to,
Hmm.
right? And we make it, and for some people, it's very appealing to, but,
Hmm.
with the ones that are making the decisions are living the same life you are.
Interesting. And so from the owner point of view, which is a bit misleading word because you are all as partners, you are all owners. From the original owner's point of view, when they made this switch to the structure that they have now, you know, what are the benefits to them? You've talked about some of it already, but just to ask it in a focused question, some of the benefits. And I'm curious, do you see any drawbacks to the way that you guys are structured or from them for them?
Well, the benefits, I think, came in recruiting, right? Like, that's
Mm,
how they were able to run and in some ways also influence the field, right?
mhm.
Because we're such a big group, we command a seat at the table in places where you wouldn't otherwise have a seat at the table. And so,
Like, what's an
um,
example?
when for the American Academy of Otolaryngology,
Okay.
no singular practice of like a big practice is still 7 or 8 people, is going to have as much influence as 250 members. I mean, we're not all otolaryngologists. There are a lot of each office, the way it's set up, each office has an allergist.
Okay.
So, maybe 210 otolaryngologists, but 210 voting members of the American Academy of Otolaryngology. That gives us a
On
little
one
more,
practice. Yeah.
yeah, when we speak with one voice, like
Hmm.
like a caucus, right?
Yeah.
But one of the drawbacks, I mentioned private equity. Now, remember, this was private equity 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's not
Yeah.
these recent sales. But one of the drawbacks for them would have been private equity, right? If they had been the majority shareholders of this practice now, in what with what private equity has been doing recently, they could have made millions upon millions of dollars
Yeah.
selling the practice because they're in their retirement years,
Hmm.
right? And so now they couldn't do that. Why? Because you have a bunch of doctors like me in their I'm in my 40s, but you've got some partners that are like late 30s, early 40s that have equal voting rights. So if, private equity were to approach us now, it would have to be some really appealing deal for someone at the beginning of their, or in the like,
Yeah.
early middle of their career, to really be being willing to relinquish the type of control you have to do
Hmm.
in order to sell to private equity. So they weren't able to do that. I don't know if they would have, but they weren't able to
Yeah.
cash out like that, because they weren't majority shareholders.
And would it be a unanimous vote? Let's imagine some buyer showed up one day and said, name your number. Uh,
I don't, I'm not able to
got it.
get into specifics,
Fair
but
enough.
it has to be a sizable number of
Okay.
votes in order to make that happen.
Do you
And
think there's any drawbacks to the original owners with the structure as it's laid out now?
well, I think yes, and also there's no for us there's no buyout. Like,
Okay.
when they retire, they retire. So they benefit from having been part of this amazing practice and well-oiled machine. But when they're retired, in a lot of these smaller practices, you've got to buy out the
Hmm.
retiring partner, right? You got to pay them a lot of money. And if you don't, they might sell the practice to private equity. But for us, there's no buyout. When you retire, you retire.
You retire just like anything else. Have a
Yeah.
party and enjoy retirement. Okay.
Yeah.
What about from your point of view? So similar questions, benefits of this structure compared to being in some other, practice structure. Any drawbacks from your point of view?
I mean, drawbacks, no. Again, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I
Yeah,
love
it's
this
true.
place. I love my practice. I really don't see, no, I really don't see any drawbacks
Yeah.
because, um, and the benefits are countless. Like, another example of something I think we do really well is we have a bunch of committees. So we have a bunch of
Mhm.
committees that you don't have to serve on. It's not like, oh, oh,
Mhm.
you have to join this committee in order to meet your requirements. No, you're an owner of this practice. And so we want the partners and even the associates to take ownership of their practice. If they think they see something that's not being run well, that could be run better, we want to hear about it. And we have all these committees to help it run better. The committees advise the board on
Mhm.
issues that, these 7 physicians can't have their eyeballs on everything at all times and can't think of everything at all times. So we've got like the electronic medical record committee, the audiology committee, compliance committee, finance. We've got, I don't know how many committees we have at this point, but it's quite a few, and it continues to grow. And actually
Yeah.
something that I started in the practice, and I think we might be talking about in a later episode,
Yeah.
is the patient experience committee, because I saw that as something that we really needed to work on. I mean, listen, the patients do have a great experience with us. It is
Yeah.
very like, I think we do a good job with it, but I also thought we could do a better job. And it was a personal passion of mine. So I
Mhm.
approached the board of it. They said, great idea. They had some of the people from administration join the committee, and it's actually snowballed in size because so many people are like, this is great. I want to be a part of it.
Mhm.
And so if you have an interest, if you see something that could work better, do it.
Right.
Put your hat in the ring, see if you can do it better. And so,
Yeah.
um, that's that, drawbacks. Yeah, I don't, one drawback is we're not a hospital,
Mhm.
right? We don't have the same leverage that they do. We're two
That's a practice
practices.
thing. That's not like your
Yeah.
structure thing, but I
Yeah.
know what you mean, but yeah.
But yeah, they still have much more leverage over really everything.
Mhm.
Um, than we do, which is discouraging, right? Because the physicians, like, I feel like we represent physicians. We're like the lighthouse. We're like the
Yeah.
light in the dark of what a physician practice really could be.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, drawbacks.
Do
No,
you do
I
you do
really
you
can't think of
do
any.
you view it as a drawback? Like you're going to retire one day and you're a partner, there's nothing to sort of, I guess, cash in. You
Well,
think of the word partner, you think of owning, like that typically they travel
yeah,
together, you
yeah,
know?
yes. So I mean, I have skin in the game in that, like, if for some reason we weren't able to cover our costs, then I'm one of the owners that's going to need to pony up some cash in order to pay our bills,
Hmm.
right? Like I'm an owner in that, and certainly that came up as a possibility during lockdown.
Hmm.
Um,
Mm.
but yeah, um, but you know, the sacrifice was really made by those that came before me, not by me.
Hmm.
You know, they So if I think of other private practice owners that are listening to this, or that you've interviewed, they've really put a lot of financial risk and time and effort into starting and building a practice. And I didn't do that.
Hmm.
Those that came before me did it, and I'm just reaping the benefits of
Okay.
that. And
Okay.
so, the fact that I'd retire, but I also didn't have a buy-in.
True.
I had sweat equity. I worked my butt off
Hmm.
in order to build the practice that I have. I
Hmm.
did. I earned it, and I earned it as defined by them.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
the thing. Like, if you have someone who's listening to this podcast who wants to duplicate the model,
Hmm.
what I think they really need to think about is how much it's worth to them, because there's got to be a number out there, right? The risks you took, the sacrifices that you made in order to put up your shingle and start your practice, that has a price. So
Hmm.
if you're going to bring someone in as an equal partner, and I mean equal partner,
Yeah.
you decide what the revenue split is going to be, but in terms of ownership, you have to decide what that is worth.
Hmm.
You put a number on it, and you either have someone earn it in sweat equity or earn it in um or a
Some
buy-in.
other agreed upon way. Yeah.
Some some way to allow them to be on equal footing with you, because there should be a price. And if you want to make your practice grow, if you want to make it appealing, if you want to put yourself head and shoulders above your competitors when it comes to recruiting, give
Yeah.
people that possibility. And there's got to be a value to you, and you just have to decide what that is.
And there's another thing I like about it too, which is, everybody's an owner, right? So the owner mindset versus the employee mindset. I've been in both worlds. And I've been, for me, it was very large companies. And, I'll give you an example. We'd watch a big layoff and I would watch this. And it was very, it was very unnerving. I was never affected by it. But then we'd hear, the leadership say, but hey, everybody, stay focused on your goals for the end of the year. And I would just look at them and go, sure. Like, oh, what,
Yeah.
what? What? Um, what I really said to myself was message received,
Yeah.
because these people with years of experience, here's your box, here's 15 minutes, message received. I'm an employee, and but in your model, everybody's an owner, and there's a different mindset, especially, and when you want that is when times are tough, not just when times are good. You want everyone to roll up their sleeves. You urge everyone to. Um, Owners will, some employees will, but not everyone. It's a lot to ask,
And
to
that's
roll
one
up
good
too
thing about our
much.
practice too, is because of our size, we can, those employees that do show initiative and do great work, because we're so big, there's a lot of places for them to go within the practice,
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
There's a lot of possibilities for promotion, right?
Hmm.
You're in a small practice, 2, 3 offices, there's only so much leadership. There are only so many possibilities,
Hmm.
but with us, there are a lot more possibilities. And so that happens a lot.
Yeah,
The cream rises to the top and then they get promoted.
yeah, yeah. And it's really interesting. It's one of the things I love about doing this podcast. I get to talk to people who do things I've never thought of before, and so it's really interesting. Um, a couple of questions that I ask every guest to kind of bring us to the finish line. First one is just in the context of what we talked about. Is there anything you think I should have asked you but just didn't?
No. I think this was a great interview. You
Okay.
covered.
I get like half and half, so it's always that
Yeah.
good to ask. You never know. And the other question is, so somebody's listening, we've caught their attention in one way or another, and like, you know what, I want to get started more seriously on this. Of all the places they could start, what are 1 or 2 things you would tell them to start on to march down the path towards the structure that you guys have?
So I think the two things that they need to figure out are, um, one is what I said earlier, in that how much is it worth to you? How much was the blood, sweat, and tears that you and sacrifice that you put into building your practice? How much is that worth, so that if someone were to become on equal footing with you, what would they need to do so that
Mhm.
you wouldn't, resent them for the rest of their career for taking the easy path,
Mhm.
right? You don't want to make it too easy. You don't want to make it too hard. It needs to be attainable.
Yeah.
But if you really want your practice to grow and be able to benefit the ways that ours have, I really think that this is the secret sauce. This is the thing that allowed us to go from, 12, 15 original partners in 3 different offices to 250 physicians. So what is it worth to you to bring someone on in equal footing? And the other thing you have to decide on is your compensation model.
Mhm.
Like if you do bring them on, what is that compensation going to look like and how is it going to be equitable? Because you want to make sure that you're getting paid for your administrative task. How is that going to be divided up? Now for us, we have ways of doing it. Most, the committee work is mostly unpaid work. Some of the committees have, it's really a ton of work. And so we compensate them accordingly. But,
Okay.
for the most part,
I was
we've
wondering
got,
about that. Is that just sort of on top of your day job, like a volunteer?
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's because
Okay.
like you said, the owner mentality. We're owners. We want this to thrive.
Yeah.
And so we behave differently because of it, right?
Hmm.
Like as opposed to like begrudgingly joining some hospital committee about something you don't really care that much about just because
Right.
you got to check that box.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is the compensation. For us, we've got fixed expenses and variable expenses, and so we have a specific compensation model that applies to everybody, and it's equal to partners. So you could have someone who's been a partner for 10 years and someone who just became partner, but if the one that's just been a partner for a year is really cranking, they're going to earn a lot more.
Mhm.
And so like it's not like that compensation changes. Once you're partner, equal voting rights, and the compensation model is identical. I mean, it's a little different for ENTs and allergists just because of the way the income flows. One does allergy immunotherapy and the other one does, more procedures. So that,
Sure, but that would
but
be the
that's
same.
again, that's
Yeah.
agreed upon. That's agreed upon by everyone. This is already
Okay.
pre-written and pre-agreed upon. When you join the practice, you know what you're getting into. And so,
Yeah.
in some practices, there's this carrot out there. You'll be a partner in name only, but not really an equal voting partner, not
Yeah,
really in the same compensation model. So you gotta figure out what it's worth to you and how to make the compensation equitable. And in some practices, it might be just everyone takes home an equal share. Um,
yeah,
but you might want to have some variable in there so that if you really have someone that's, hitting the accelerator, they're a little more motivated to do so.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, and the idea of think about what it's worth to you. Like, don't 5 minute that. That's a serious exercise. Hit it from different angles. What's it worth financially, non-financially? There's probably 4 or 5 subcategories in there. Think it through. Be sure about it because there's a lot of benefits to doing it, but don't just half-ass the what's it worth to me because you will be unhappy if you
Yeah.
do it that way. Yeah.
And I have lots of friends who join practices and they're always, I get asked advice by some of them. I mean, I used to, now I'm getting, in my 40s, so
Mhm.
people are generally staying where they are now, but
Yeah.
it used to be, I guess, and I was always, touting what I had and they were always looking for it and couldn't find it. And so if you want to keep your physicians, if you want to grow your practice, if you want to have more physicians, more partners in your practice, this is a model to really strongly consider.
Owner mindset. Man,
Yeah.
it sounds very, very compelling. Well, cool. Well, Brad, thank you. Thank you for coming on and shedding some light on your how your practice operates, how it works. Hopefully very helpful to some other people thinking about the same thing. Um, Once again, Brad Block with ENT and Allergy Associates, that New York practice that we are all going to hear. I'm going to hear it all the time now, I'm sure, along with movie quotes. And also the host of the Physician's Guide to Doctoring podcast. It's available everywhere, all the podcast platforms, YouTube as well. So Google that, you'll find it all over the place. Thank you. We'll put all that contact info in the show notes as well. Couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you're someone like Brad who works in a practice and you've got some experience in the business side of practice that you think others would benefit from, or if you're someone like me who serves private practices, same thing, you've got some experience you think they would benefit from, then we want you to come on PracticeCare as soon as possible and tell everyone about it. In the show notes to Brad's episode and all episodes, there's a link, couple of questions, tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to PracticeCare, please, on Apple Podcasts. We're on all the platforms, also wherever you listen to them, so that you can start getting episodes regularly. Thanks very much, and until next time.